On tonight's show, we're asking, in light of current high-profile cases, is sex a credible addiction? And at what point does an overindulgence become a problem? Hello, welcome to Review Weekly. I'm Caroline Davies. Since Hollywood A-lister Michael Douglas first brought widespread attention to the term sex addiction in the 90s, and more recently with celebrities like comedian Russell Brand and golfer Tiger Woods being treated for it, sex addiction is gaining recognition as a legitimate medical condition. And with the release of Shame, the topic comes under the scrutiny of cinema. And why not? With reports stating that 1 in 20 of us suffer from some form of sex addiction, are we now part of a nation who sees overindulgence as a pleasure or as an illness? Or are self-confessed addicts trying to legitimise their inability to remain faithful or commit to long-term relationships? I'm joined by film critic Jill Henderson and Graham Allen, accredited counsellor and psychotherapist. Tonight we're reviewing Steve McQueen's controversial new film Shame. The film tackles the taboo subject of sex addiction through the eyes of 30-something New Yorker Brandon, as he indulges in his sexual fantasies with very little restraint. It's a harrowing and erotic second outing from British film director McQueen. So is this film a timely examination towards our attitudes to overindulgence, or does it sensationalise what can be seen as a contentious medical condition? So, Jill, if I can come to you first, the film's been much lauded by critics. What for you, though, was the most memorable thing about it?
I think one of the most important things you've got to remember about Steve McQueen is he started out as a visual artist, making silent films in a gallery context. And I think that comes across in the way he composes the shots in the film. There are so many fantastic scenes, but I mean, just to pick on a couple, the kind of almost opening shot in his apartment where you see Brandon walking around naked and the phone rings and it's Sissy, and everything in that shot has been put where it is absolutely meticulously perfectly. So the framing and the way that it looks is fantastic, but it also gives you the psychological, very controlled way that he's living his life at that time. Yeah. And then one of the other things that he does is use these very extreme close-ups where you're right into somebody's face. A lot of people have talked about the fact he does that so much with Fassbender, but he also does that in the scene in the bar when Sissy's singing New York, New York, and you're right in this woman's face when she's singing, which has the most extraordinary impact on the audience.
Yeah, it's very powerful. I mean, what about that scene you just saw, though? Do you think it romanticises the concept of a sex addict? I mean, if you were on a subway and you looked up and you saw a man staring at you the way Brandon was staring at that woman, I mean, what would you do?
Well, I'd get off. But I think there's a point there, but I think it's very clever what McQueen does. He starts off with the man who seems like he's got it all, good-looking, handsome, which you could just argue that, well, that's great that he's having all this sex and watching all this porn. But through the film, Brandon's life falls apart, and you see the kind of the inner torment that he's had become much more apparent. So by the end, you'd no more think that being a sex addict is fun than you'd think that Nicolas Cage in Leaving Las Vegas was having a nice drink. You know, it's taken to that point where you actually feel quite sickened by it yourself.
Yeah. Mm. So we sent a team to get the public's reaction at the film's Wimbledon preview.
Fassbender's performance, I thought he was really good at the movie.
No, it was very brave. It was very raw. He goes to places that you wouldn't expect him to.
I was absolutely transfixed by it, and then just before the very end, I thought, I wonder if they'd taken it a bit too far, and that sort of took me out of it a bit. But then by the end, I was back on board. I thought it was incredible.
So, Graham, one of the points raised by the audience there was the sheer magnitude of Michael Fassbender's performance. I mean, he's tipped to win an Oscar. He's already won Best Actor at the Venice Film Festival. But for you, is that an adequate portrayal of a sex addict?
Yes, I thought it was very good. I was a bit concerned going into the film whether it would be slightly kind of cliched or dip out, but I thought it was the slow deconstruction over the course of the film that he picked up really, really well.
Yeah. I mean, any redemption for you as far as you're concerned?
I think there was. I mean, I think this is slightly, I've heard different views on this, but I thought right at the end, actually, the fact that he doesn't sort of track the woman that he's seen and just immediately kind of follow her out, for me was a small sign of redemption, yeah.
I mean, but what about sex addiction itself? Is it a compulsion? Is it a behavioural problem? I mean, do you really see it as a pure addiction like alcohol or drugs?
Well, I think, you know, I mean, some people say it's going to be the big addiction of our age, partly because of availability of things like pornography and just acting out. So I think you talk about components, and there's this compulsion, these urges, which are kind of almost encouraged, really, by the way of the availability of porn.
But what if you look at the gay community, vast swathes of the gay community go and indulge in sort of non-emotional physical transactions? I mean, they can't all be sex addicts.
No, I mean, funnily enough, I read an interview with a gay couple during the week in one of the papers, and he actually recognised certain things in it, and he admitted that it was the urges, it was the nature of the urges that really kind of defined the problem. Is it something I can manage, or is it unmanageable? So
it's your relationship with it that really is out of control. Yeah. So I mean, for you, Jill, do you think that the fact that Brendan is sort of, it reinforces the stereotypes that we have of sex addiction in our day and age? He's good looking, he's young, he's male, he's got sort of high net worth individual, and through the sheer, just because they're famous or because they have money, the access and the availability is that much more. I mean, surely if it was your average Joe on the street, they'd just be seen as a sex pest, wouldn't they?
Well, probably, but I mean, I would argue that what McQueen's done in this film has taken any eroticism and any sex out of sex addiction, because believe me, those sex scenes do not make you want to go out and have sex afterwards. I mean, I think he's actually looking at something, and I would also argue the film's about something more than just sex addiction. It's about the damage that when people are damaged, they develop compulsions, and in a way, sex is just one of those compulsions. Sissy is compelled to run after men who don't want her.
Yeah. I mean, do you really feel at the beginning that he's actually got it all under control, though?
I think there are cracks there. I think we talked a bit about risk. I think there's a risk element. I mean, he's got a horde of really hardcore porn on his computer at work. I mean, that is really taking it right to the edge.
I mean, you know, other people may well be sacked. For instance, he has a colleague in the office, his manager, who seems to be fairly benevolent towards him.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's all we've got time for on tonight's show. Thank you very much, Jill. Thank you, Graham, for joining us. Shame is in cinemas from today. Next week, with the awards season fast approaching, we'll be looking at Hollywood legend Clint Eastwood's new directorial release, J. Edgar, and ask, is this the film to beat at this year's Oscars? Thank you and good night.